get the show started. Thank you everyone for joining. Welcome to Enrhythm Lightning Talks. I'm Parag Katkar, your host for tonight. I'm the head of consulting practices at Enrhythm. And Enrhythm Lightning Talks are hosted every Thursday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Each week, one of our practice area consultants shares something that they have learned or implemented recently, which will help you in learning and growth. This week, our SZ practice lead, Mikhail, is going to talk about how to mock the APIs using WireMock. I'm super excited to hear your thoughts on it, Mikhail. Let's get it started.
Okay. Hi, guys. I'm happy to see you all here. My name is Mikhail Davydov. I'm working here in Enrhythm for 3 years already on the different projects, and I recently joined Wayfair. As a client. And today I want to share my experience with implementing API test automation frameworks using WireMock. We will talk about why you may at all want to use stubbing for your API testing and end-to-end testing, as well what is WireMock, and I will also talk about our solution that we implemented to solve the problem at hand. So first of all, what problem I am talking about? In this project, our system that we are testing is basically a translation layer between some external vendor system and Wayfair APIs, or it may be, your company APIs, or any kind of APIs that we need to integrate with. When you are not on production yet, when you are developing, obviously you want to be to test, usually you would be doing testing on the dev environment. So all those backends that your system actually works with, they need, if you want to be able to test, they need to be available. They need to have all the data that you need. They need to have actually consistent data. The data should be consistent between different systems, and all those APIs should exist. Unfortunately, in the real life, it is very often not the case, because it may be that the environment is used for the development by the teams, and there is no guarantee that it is up and running and what version of the application there is. There is absolutely no guarantee that the data will be there, or maybe some data is there and others is not. And also it may happen that you are developing some new system that will depend on the API that is not available yet, but you should be able still to, how this API would look like. You should be able to develop it and to allow the external system that you're integrating with to do the testing. So this is just the example of our system that we had in Wayfair, but it may be any other system that have a lot of backends or a few of backends, and where you want to be able to do the API and end-to-end testing. So we discussed that, okay, what are discuss the problems. So what are the typical solutions of this situation? So how we can test a system that have a lot of backends. Again, first we may try to force other teams that provide the backend APIs that we're integrating with, we can try to force them to have a good staging environment that we can use. Unfortunately, it doesn't usually work that way. So it is really hard by administrative measures to have a environment, especially if you have a really large organization and some of the teams may be outside of your direct group, for instance. So even if you can, you will still will not have control over the test data, because it again will require a lot of coordination between all those teams that in the microservices world pretty often just doesn't exist. And even if we are able to do all that, if the test fails, all we see that it is fails, but we have no idea why it is failing. Is it a problem with the API that we're integrating with? Is it the problem with our system? Or maybe it is infrastructure problem. That is also very likely. So the solution that is used in those cases is a mocking. And the most popular mocking service is called, or rather the mock server is called WireMock. One of the features of WireMock that is most well known by all the developers is that WireMock can be used from the JUnit unit tests, which is pretty nice. It is a really great feature. The problem is that we are here talking about the end-to-end and API testing, not about unit testing. So you cannot write it is really hard to write the unit tests to be the end-to-end testing, end-to-end test. So you can try to write the unit, how to say, you can try to use JUnit to write end-to-end tests. There is no problem with that. But you will have to basically to create all the mocks required as a part of your test. So your test will start from kind of setting up tens and maybe hundreds of mocks, and then tearing them down after each test. At least this is how JUnit integration of the WireMock usually works. So it is probably not, it is a huge overhead. It's probably not what we want. Finally, you can try to use the WireMock server can be run in the standalone mode, which is really, really great. And for this case in particular, the problem with that one is that if you have one shared server that is shared between different developers, different teams, it is really hard to avoid conflicts because how you know who is doing what with this server, because it is available, the stub mappings may be easily modified, and imagine that it is also stateful. So there are obvious problems if you try, even if you try to run several tests at the same time. But imagine that several developers are trying to add some new mocks or modify the existing ones, and they are doing it without coordination with each other. So there will be a mess. And finally, there is a lot of manual maintenance. So if you're creating all those mocks manually, it's a lot of manual maintenance. If you record them once, again, how do you update them? Manually, this is a big overhead. So yeah, I already mentioned WireMock. So what is WireMock? and why WireMock? WireMock is simply the most popular general purpose mock server that integrates, as I already mentioned, with JUnit, but as well with many other frameworks, including the ones for the contract testing, by the way. It can be run as a standalone server, which is also pretty handy. And even if it may be not a great solution in some environments, it may work just great in others. The feature that we'll be using in this particular presentation is that WireMock server can record so-called stub mappings. So how it works? You have the configured WireMock server, and then you point your application to use WireMock server instead of the real backend, right? To do that, you need to configure WireMock server and tell it if it receives certain requests with a certain path, it will proxy it, it will redirect it to the real backend. So in this recording mode, you are working with your application as if you would be working with it if you are using the real life backends. But in the same time, WireMock is recording everything that is coming through the server, all the requests and all the responses, and it creates so-called stub mappings, which is basically some metadata that needed to identify the certain request, HTTP request, and it also contains information about which response we received from the real backend when we called it with this particular request. So next, and after that, you can run the WireMock after the recording stops. You can run the WireMock in the regular mode when you will not have a proxy, you will not have a live backend, but every time when your applications call the WireMock server in this case with the request that it saw before and that was in the recording, it will respond with a pre-recorded response. So it is called stub mappings. But what is interesting is that those stub mappings is not just, you don't have to just have a hard-coded request and hard-coded response. You can have it's very flexible. So you can have a really complex rules saying how you identify requests and what should be in the response. So you can use some parts of the requests in the response. You can use kind of functions to generate some data. You can use random data, etc., etc. So it is really flexible and customizable system, but also it allows, in addition to a very flexible stub mappings, it can you can also intercept and rewrite both requests and responses. So you can modify on the fly how WireMock will be processing your requests and how it will be responding. Guys, any questions so far? Okay, so then let's see how you can easily complement your existing service API testing, the testing with a real live backend, with component testing using a mock server. so that you can break free from all those external dependencies and have a reliable set of tests that will pass every time unless something changes or something broke in your application. So you don't depend on the external services anymore. You can have those tests as a part of your CI/CD pipeline and don't worry about flakiness associated with infrastructure or availability of those backends or other data that is there. So first, you develop the conventional API test, the regular test with a real backends. There may be situation, as we saw before, when you don't currently yet have this this service. In this case, you would have to manually create the mocks, as we will see next. But again, first we're trying to write the test against the real backends we created. We make sure that it works. If it doesn't work out of the box, we can just create the mocks manually, as we will see afterwards. So the next step is that we are configuring our application that we're testing to point to the WireMock server instead of pointing to the real backends, to the live backends. In this case, we rerun the test that we created before, the exactly same test with exactly same data, but this time the application will route its traffic to the proxy, and the WireMock proxy will record the stub mappings that later we will use to run the test without the real backends. So after we did that, we again reconfigure our application and a test that it works with a WireMock server, and we reconfigure WireMock server to not to use proxy, but to use the record the stub mappings. We rerun the test, and it just worked. And profit. So you have the set of tests that can be used as either integration or component tests. Those component tests can be run as a part of CI/CD pipeline, so that you don't have a dependence on external services, and those tests are not flaky. You will be able to continue development if something happens with a backend, which frankly happens quite a lot. And finally, you don't have to use those recorded mocks. You can create your own mocks manually, as I already mentioned. WireMock is extremely flexible and allows you to do a really complex and really robust stub mappings that are really universal, that you can use in addition to your recorded mocks. But as it usually how it usually works, this solution that we use, it's not a silver bullet. It obviously have its downsides. So first of all, if you really want to record, you need to have something that you record. So you will still, at least for initial test creation, you will need some kind of the backend. What you can use, if you have if your API calls are read-only and you have a production environment instead of dev environment, you can try to use that just for recording. But if you don't have the environment, the solution with recorded mocks obviously wouldn't work, and you will have to create the mocks yourself. The second problem is more complex, is that if you stop running your API tests with the real backends, and you just try to rely on the tests with the mock backends that you created, if your mocks became obsolete, meaning if application, if the backends that we rely on, if those teams kind of made some changes, you will never know about it. As soon as you're not running the test with the real backends, you will not know if something happened with them. So for that, you should either have a contract testing, which is absolutely a separate topic, or you still will need to continue at least occasionally running those tests with the real backends. And again, if we are still running the tests with the real backends, then we have all the same problem that we discussed before, with only one difference. So first of all, you have something, you don't have to run them that often. You only run them when you suspect that your services may have changed, the backends that you rely on, that they may have changed. The second thing is that you can run your API tests as a part of CI/CD pipeline, the ones that you for which you have mock backends. And it is a very big deal because it means that those tests can be created by developers. Because obviously developers wouldn't like to try to solve all those problems with data, with unstable environments, etc. So, and as SDT, your role actually is to give developers an easy way to create and rerun their tests. And this is what this framework was mostly about. And finally, the final downside is that as we saw before, you will have to configure your application to use the mock server. And as we saw in the first slide, we have a lot of those backends. So configuring it may be a little cumbersome. So it also adds some complexity. But overall, this framework allows you to do things that you would never be able to do with live backends, especially again in the cases when the backends are unstable, they doesn't exist, they don't have necessary data, etc. Okay, so this is a time for questions and my answers.